Welcome to the English Homemaker podcast, a podcast where we discuss all things home, a realistic but fresh view of homemaking from the suburbs of the south of England. I'm your host, Alyssa Evelyn. Welcome to episode 11 of the English Homemaker. Hello everybody, how are you today? I hope everybody is feeling well and having a great day. I have an interview to share with you today and I am so excited for this. When I sat down to sort of plan out and flesh out the idea of this podcast, one of the names that came up as someone I would love to interview is Kezia from The Whole Home, and that is who we have today. I am so happy that she agreed to an interview today, and we just had a really good time chatting this morning. So I'm just really excited to share the conversation with you. I think it will really help a lot of you out there who would love to go on a journey of sustainability and are a bit kind of unsure about how to do it. Appreciate maybe a few mindset shifts need to occur, and you'll hear the phrase mindset shift a lot in this podcast. I think we talk about a lot of practical things as well as a lot of the kind of overarching thoughts behind changing the way we think about consumerism. And I think it's just a conversation that needs to be had and is really important to the homemaker. So I am so excited to share this with you. I have to apologise for my voice. I have had a little bit of a cold. I've got a very clear head though, so I felt good doing the interview. I just sound kind of funny, so I do excuse my voice not being quite the same as usual. Well, welcome to the podcast, Kezia. How are you today?
Hello, I am doing well. It's fun to be here. Thanks for having me.
So I have known you online for actually a really long time, and in various iterations of your being online. And I have your wonderful cookbook that I loved pieces actually, and use loads of the recipes from still, and is printed out and in various different places actually in my kitchen. So I think I've known you for a long time. I feel like that was a while ago that you did your cookbook.
Yeah, there have been, you said different iterations of my life online. There have been a few. It's just the journey, isn't it? And I've done, which book do you have? There have been a few.
The cookbook that has a skillet cookie in it and has an excellent granola recipe. Yes, it is. It is.
So I was excited to make that one. I did that one, actually, I think in 2020. And my whole family sat around editing it during the early days of lockdown, because I'd done so many niche ones with allergy-friendly things because of what we were doing, and we were running an allergy-friendly bakery at that point. But then I went, actually, I want to put out a book that is the things we eat every day, that are the things we fill our meal plan with, that are the simple recipes that use what's in season, that can be altered. And so that book was really the book of this is how we actually eat day to day. So it is my favorite one.
But now you've kind of you've moved a little more away from food and definitely more into this world of sustainability, conscious consumerism. And I find all of that fascinating. And I love the way that you talk about it in a way that it is non-judgmental, it's inoffensive, it's simple, it's easy. But you talk about it all as well. You're very honest and you talk about the politics. It's very all encompassing. And when I started this podcast, was so desperate for you to get on to the podcast to talk to us about it, because you're so knowledgeable and you do communicate it in a way that I understand. And so I'm really happy to have you on to talk about all these things today, as well as just the kind of nitty-gritty of daily life, some of the bigger things as well. So we've kind of done a bit of an introduction, but would you give us who are you, where do you come from, and how did you get into this sort of thing? I mean, tell us your life story.
My life story. I am a born and bred Londoner. I grew up in the south of London. And the journey has started with food, like you said, online, and then we've moved into other things. But for me, it's always kind of stemmed from the same place inside. It's just come out in different ways online at different points in the journey. And the first kind of piece of my childhood that relates to the journey I now share, I think, are two things. So we as kids in England walked through the BSE crisis scare situations.
Yes.
And, the mad cow disease, BSE. And when that happened, suddenly all I think all beef products disappeared from our home, every single one. And we started buying meat from an organic farm. One time when we were on holiday, visit the organic farm where our meat came from and picked up a package. So we drove in and, saw all the live animals and then dead ones hanging up, and then picked up our box of meat. And it made me suddenly go, oh, our meat comes from somewhere. And there's this story of our meat before it lands on our plate. And all meat has disappeared, but now we're being picky about our meat for various different reasons. So actually what happens to meat before it lands on our plate has an impact on me and other things. And that was my first moment of going, oh, okay, there's a story before it gets on my plate. And then when I was about in my early teenage years, my dad and I were reading some statistics about fair trade chocolate. And I think at that point, the statistic that we read was that 80% of chocolate had slave or forced labor somewhere in the supply chain. Don't quote me on that statistic, but that's the one that stuck in my head. And we decided there, I remember the moment standing in the kitchen, that we were no longer going to eat chocolate unless we knew that it did not have forced labor, slave labor in the supply chain. And my dad and I both to this day still hold by that. And again, that was another moment of going, okay, there's a story to food before it lands on my plate. And so I then, as a teenager, was a very strict vegan down to my hideously ugly vegetarian school shoes, and was like obsessively reading labels to make sure there were no animal products in my food. And then the way we've eaten has gone on a journey, which is how my presence online first started, because I wound up through a stint doing preclinical veterinary medicine, which I then dropped out of. Because I realized it wasn't what I wanted to do with my life, but loved the science, loved the course. But I dropped out and found myself in the States, where I met my husband. I kind of took some time out, went over there, met him, and then still found myself there 12 years later. So we spent the last 12 years before coming to England. We were in California, and going to America, I saw a very different food system and very different ways of eating than I had in England. And so then when I met my husband, he's from Austin, Texas, and was from a hunting family, big meat eater, meat 3 meals a day. And so when I started sharing online, it was this journey of how did two very, very different people in their history with food and eating come together and figure that out, pulling in these same, not being judgmental, letting everyone have their own journey, so not suddenly dictating what each other eats, but how do we do this together? And so I just started documenting that online. And from there, it took different twists and turns. When growing up in Europe, my family, we eat for fun. That's what we do. That's how we socialize. We eat. And then going to America, I met more people than I ever had done before with food intolerances, including my husband, who has a peanut allergy. And then for me, I still wanted to be able to bring everyone around the table and have everyone eat, to be together, to socialize, to share life. And so I started creating recipes that were free from all the major allergens, so that we could serve one thing at the table and everyone could eat in that communal, happy eating moment that I had grown up with. And then from there, having created these things, we then started selling them in all the local bakeries and coffee shops in our town. And then that led to people online saying, we want the recipes. And I very naively said, I'll make an ebook. And then I realized I'm the least techie person on the planet. And months and months putting together this ebook of grain-free, dairy-free, soy-free baked donuts, and released it out into the world. And that was the beginning of my ebook journey. And then that kind of next twist of the online journey, which was, selling donuts and ebooks and documenting that whole thing. And and then, like you said, we've kind of moved more into the, sustainability and conscious consumerism space. I think because in, starting with food and looking at how the story of food before it gets to our plate and how we navigate that as a family, it was when I had kids and when I was pregnant that I began to look at both, I think what I put on my body has an impact, both in the supply chain before it gets to me and on my body being pregnant. I began to think about that more. And then when I was buying baby clothes, suddenly I was looking at organic clothes. Or suddenly that was what was on the market. There was that option, which I'd never seen for adults before 10 years ago. And going, wait, why do organic clothes matter? What's that story? What's the story of clothes before they get to me? And so that led me to dive into that whole story of the clothing industry and where they're coming from and who's making them and their impact on the earth and on humans before and after they spend time in our home. And so then that kind of brought that whole aspect in. And I think, that is largely where I now focus online, in part because I think, and this is a whole separate topic, but I think sometimes in looking at the way we eat and sharing that globally, I think that's actually there are some negative implications of that, in that we shouldn't all be eating the same thing, because what's seasonal and local is different to different people at different times, and many different factors in there. But yeah, so that's kind of where we are now. That was long, but yeah, that's
fascinating. I think you have such a fascinating story, and I think it's so layered, and it's wonderful that you can see the progression. I'm trying to remember at which point I found you, and I'm trying to work out if it was the donuts or it might have been just after that. It was definitely when you were living in California.
It was. I mean, to start with, my follower base was mostly in the UK, and then really early on in our journey, when we were in California in that kind of donut time, I kept waking up to just hundreds and hundreds of new followers, and was like, I don't know where these are all coming from. And for some reason, probably some intern at Vogue knew who I was, and Vogue kept posting about us. But I was like, how did this ever happen? And to this day, I don't really know. But so yeah, that got me. But it was English Vogue, so a lot of UK followers came through. I'm sure some intern at Vogue was like, let's post about this. Anyway.
Oh, that's wonderful. Is there, how do I say this? Sustainability, obviously you've spoken about the arc of your story, but what is it that drives you? How do you keep learning about it? What is it that gets you about sustainability? Because I think there could be, obviously we can go all the way back to your childhood and think about those things, but what keeps you going? Obviously there's loads of news and information, and potentially could be too much, but is there something that holds you? Is there something that keeps you coming back?
I think it's different things at different times. I think, though, the core things for me, and like you said, it can often be too much information. And I don't feel like almost in my lifetime I would need any new information to keep me on this journey. I feel like, already I have what I need to live this journey for a lifetime. Obviously, there's new pieces we learn along the way. But I think I would probably pick two things to say. And that's when I look at my kids and the next generation. And in all things, I want to hand my kids good. I want to make their lives better in any way that I can, and grow them and teach them. And when they were young, some of the decisions that we were looking at in our home, I realized if I make this decision, I am playing into creating problems their generation has to solve. And I went, that as a parent is not what I want to do. I want to hand them better realities than we have, not spend my life sewing into problems that I don't have to solve, but their generation will. I don't want them to solve the crises that we created or didn't solve. And that really drove some things for me to just look at them in the next generation. And think about what we're handing to them. But I think also for me, it's been this concept of loving our neighbor. And, I think a lot of, faiths, religions, there's many different ways that people look at that concept of loving your neighbor, but it's kind of, I think, a principle in lots of different walks of life. But this idea that our neighbor used to be the person who was right next door to us and somebody that we could see. And it's easier to want to have a positive impact and to love them most of the time, we hope, because we're seeing the effect of our actions right there. But realizing that now, with the way that we live in a global community and with global supply chains and things moving all over the world so fast, my neighbor, in terms of my actions, the people that are next affected by my actions, might live far, far away from me. I might never meet them. They might be on the other side of the world, but I still want to live that life of loving for my neighbor, caring for the people my life affects. Even though I don't see them, it just makes it a little bit more complicated. But so looking at our home and going, whereas, even 100 years ago, 200 years ago, the effects of my actions I would have been able to see. Now I want to just pause and know I can't see the effect of my actions, and I want to make sure I'm dwelling on my actions and their effect enough to still love and care for the people that my life impacts, wherever they are in the world. And actually, Martin Luther King, no one ever quotes this one speech that he did. I think it was an Easter speech or a Christmas speech. Anyway, and he says, before we leave our house in the morning, we have interacted with the person in another country that, you know, grew the grain for our bread, and the person that brew our coffee, and the person that, and he kind of talks through a morning and a breakfast scene, I think, and looking at all the different countries that have played into that moment before we even leave for work in the morning. And I always find that a really challenging one. And so, yeah, that kind of, those are some of my drives in terms of not needing new information. It's not about a new crisis. It's not about a new, but just thinking about what I'm handing to my kids and how I'm loving my neighbor, even though that might be someone far, far away.
That is a wonderful answer. I feel very much like we live in a world that's actually very selfish. So that is a beautiful answer, because it's about everybody else. I wish we could share that to everybody, that spirit of wanting to be there. It's so easy in this world to keep yourself to yourself. So I think, what a beautiful answer. Do you feel like that's a lot to do with your upbringing, that you're very outward looking in that way? That's a big question.
I think it's one of those weird things that when something is so normal and natural to us, we're like, well, it's what we should do. And that sounds maybe something to say that, but to me it is like, how could we not do that? How could we not, you know, care about our impact on those people? When we look at our kids, how could we not want to hand them something better? And I think actually, if people actually dwelled on it, I think that sentiment is at the core of everybody. It's just that other things then cloud that. And yes. So that those things, it's not actually that we need to create in people that sense of caring for the people we impact. Most people have that in their heart, I think. But then life gets busy, or we're unaware of supply chains, or it feels too complicated, or marketing is too persuasive and powerful, or social norms that have come so far from loving our neighbor and the next generation make it very difficult. We feel awkward, and those things are more immediate and closer than this other competing principle. So I think a lot of this journey is actually unpacking those other things so that we can live in that reality of wanting to care for, you know, the world and the people in it, which is why I focus so much on it being a journey. This has got to be a journey. We've got to have the time and the space to slowly unpick those things, and to be okay with where we're at, but not okay staying where we're at and moving forward, but having grace and no judgment in the process. So I think it's in all of us. Hopefully somewhere it just can get complicated.
In all of that, I think one of the big things that will be on people's mind when they're listening today is that overwhelm, that sense of being clouded, that sense of it being too much, so I can't be bothered. And stepping past that is one of your main things that you talk about. Actually, it's about making it less complicated to live a lower footprint life. But also, I do like, as I said at the beginning, how you do incorporate the bigger picture. I sometimes struggle to try and hold it all. I think you have an incredible brain, the way that you are able to see all these bigger concepts and pull them together, because it is such a complex thing. Even so much as about 3 years ago, and I've mentioned this on the podcast before, I needed to buy new pants, new knickers, and I really wanted to do it in a sustainable way, but I was overwhelmed just in this one purchasing choice of how to do it in a way that was on budget, and also something I could achieve with the skills I had, but also that was kind to the planet. And I ended up, I think, just buying a multi-pack from M&S because somewhere on their website it said it was okay or something, and it got too much for me and I couldn't do it. But in the last year, I've learned how to make my own knickers. I think I shelved it at the time, saying I feel like this would be the natural progression for me is to learn how to do it myself, because I can buy it from someone, but one pair will cost me £25. I thought that's mad. And it was a very long conversation about knickers with my husband for about 2 hours, just trying to untangle what the essential thing was for us. And I think for us, it always boils down to purchasing something that's going to last the longest. That's sort of where we end up with sustainability in this house generally, is making sure it's something that's of high quality, that's going to last. And if we can do that secondhand, so much better. Or if we can make it ourselves, so much better. That's sort of how that 2 hour conversation ended. So
it can be so complicated. And I think the complicatedness and the overwhelm can often make people bow out, because then we also get these messages online of, if you're not doing anything, you don't care, and it's too big and we can never change it anyway. And actually, I think that's why so often I like to bring it back to, actually, what am I doing to love my neighbor? Because if I feel like it's too big and I do nothing, if I came face to face with the person living by the landfill, or making my clothes in forced labor, or harvesting my chocolate, would I feel comfortable saying to them, it's too big, I'm overwhelmed? No, I would want to tell them I'm making a tiny step on the journey, because their life is important. But I think we have to break it down to small things and celebrate the wins, whatever they're like, whatever they look like. Because no one can keep going on a journey. When you have marathon runners, they get cheered on from mile 1. They don't have an empty route until mile 26. Like, you got to cheer on the process, or we never get to the end. So yeah, we've got to remove the overwhelm, which is why I stay online.
Yes, absolutely. Speaking to all the homemakers out there, I think there's a ton of questions that we could ask you that we'd like to know about things around the home, daily life, how to implement things to make our lives at home more sustainable, little steps we can take. I recently did a video where I just talked about how I just realized I could take my son's old school t-shirts that were all stained, cut them up into squares and use those as my washcloths. And one day that it was easier to implement, instead of going and buying a 3-pack of sponges wrapped in plastic from Sainsbury's. And I would love to know tips on various topics. So perhaps we could start with cleaning. That's an overwhelming thing for a lot of people, and there's so many different things we could go down, but perhaps maybe give us a few tips on sustainable cleaning. I'd love to know.
Well, I posted online recently about how I used to see my rubbish bin as just a portal to a clean house. Just, all right, we'll just toss everything in there. If we haven't used it for a long time, it can go in there, it can go. And I think just slowing down in the way that we keep our house. I guess this is more about decluttering than the kind of cleaning, but slowing down in how we bring things in and in how we let things go, and just taking the time there to go, okay, can I recycle this? Can I pass this on to a new home? Like the t-shirt, it'll be so easy to go, okay, it's done, quick, put it in the bin, great, we're done, move on, next task, my house is a little bit cleaner. But instead slowing down. So I really think about everything that leaves our house, and how is this leaving our house and where is it going to? Which I love, because it then makes you think about how you bring things into your house. Because when I bring something in, my kids yesterday were in the store looking at Halloween decorations and going, can we buy this? Can we buy this? Can we buy this? And we just stopped and went, how is this going to leave our house? And we went, okay, well, ultimately this is going to leave our house because it broke and it needs to go in landfill. So is this a wise choice to bring it into our house? Yeah, probably not. And so it kind of helps us think about how we bring things in if we think about how things leave. But in the actual cleaning, mopping floors and sweeping things, I mean, the great thing is now, more than 10 years ago, there are so many more products on the market. So if you're someone who doesn't want to be cutting up your own rags and making your own products, there are a lot more sustainable options out there for cleaning. And I love that. I use one that just is in a compostable sachet, so you're not transporting water. It goes in a metal spray bottle, and there's a window one and a floor one and a multi-purpose surface cleaner and a bathroom one, and it fits in my budget and it's great, and that's just easy for me. I also love making a vinegar and water cleaner. I usually do half vinegar, half water, few drops of an eco-friendly washing up liquid and a couple of drops of essential oil so it's not too vinegary, and I use that as my multi-purpose surface cleaner, and it's brilliant. It works so well, dirt cheap, very sustainable. So I think it's just switching one thing by one thing. Actually, on this, Nancy Birtwistle, is that her name? It was the Great British Bake Off winner, has a fantastic book on green cleaning, and it's like the Bible of how to clean your home in an eco-friendly way. And she's also very budget focused, so it's lots of homemade recipes, but for really practical things. Like I just saw the other day, she spilled oil on her patio, like flagstones, and they'd made these marks, and she was saying, okay, here's how we're going to get it off. Or I've got mold that grew on this bag, when you get like mold on fabric, and here's how we're going to get it off, and in really eco-friendly ways. So that, if you're diving into the eco green cleaning, that will probably be my one book recommendation. It's got everything in it. Will probably make a great Christmas present too.
That sounds brilliant. I shall have a little look for that. I've got a bunch of different eco-friendly cleaning books. What about laundry? I feel like that is you literally think about everything. I know you do. What tips do you have there?
Yeah, I love talking about the laundry one. I think it's been interesting. In the UK, having lived in America, the UK, we use tumble dryers a lot less than America does. America loves a tumble dryer, and it is just the routine of everything's going to go in the washer and then everything's going to go on the tumble dryer in a lot of places, more as the norm. And tumble drying is such a win to not do. I don't own a tumble dryer, so I think that is a great step to just look at how can I shift my laundry routine so I do not have to use a tumble dryer. And that can be challenging in the winter in England.
What do you do?
I hang it outside during the summer. It's fine. It all hangs outside. During the winter, I look at the weather and I save my laundry and I look at the weather, and clothes will dry in cold conditions as long as it's not wet. You can still hang it outside and it will dry. We had a really windy but really chilly day a few days ago, and it was dry pretty quickly. So I'm timing my laundry with the weather. Or then once the heat is on inside the home, then we can go back to drying stuff inside the home, whether it's on radiators or by a wood burning stove or something like that. Or even if I've used the oven for something hot, like maybe we've made pizza, I will then open the oven and put my laundry by the oven to kind of secondarily use the heat that came from the hot oven, things like that. So kind of plan that around what I'm doing with my life, which is it takes an extra step of thinking. And that's why it has to be this step-by-step journey, because if we dive into the whole way of thinking, trying to do it all, we just all need a nap. But actually, if we just take it one thing at a time, then now these things are natural to me to think about. And not to say occasionally I have to put on a little heater to get something dry, but that's not my norm and not how my routine works. And I think that's the goal. Like, we're all going to have moments where we're like, oh no, we've got to do something different, but what can we do with the norm? But my other thing, especially with having kids with laundry, is I let my kids wear dirty clothes, because in the right moments, if they're going to go out into the garden, we kind of keep play clothes for the week and then I'll wash them at the end of the week. And I think so often instead we just take off clothes at night, put them in the wash, and we end up doing so much more washing than we need to, rather than, okay, go put your play clothes back on again, and then they play in the garden or we go to the park or do whatever, and then after a few times of doing that, then they go into the wash. So I'm not actually just washing every dirty thing. I also do a lot of spot cleaning. So again, my kids have a lot less school uniform than some kids, I think, because I will more look at when we get home, we sit in the car and I go, okay, the first thing we're doing is a uniform check. Then you're going to take it off. We'll get it ready for tomorrow. And so we're looking at, okay, what needs to go in the wash? What can I actually spot clean and you can wear tomorrow to save the energy and the time and the water of washing that whole garment? It's also both not drying things and not fully washing things. Way better for the garments to be washed less. And then when we do wash, we're washing on cool. I don't know. Is that an answer?
That's a fabulous answer. Do you know, it's something I've thought about doing, but I've not implemented. Sometimes I do think to look at the jumper. I mean, my son is notoriously messy with his clothes, and my daughter is a lot more precious. So she'll have a stack of clothes in her bedroom that she's worn once, still totally clean. And my son will come home covered in paint and all sorts and his gravy all down him. So then I just think it's just got to go in the wash. But But sometimes like his PE hoodie looks just fine, actually. Yeah. But I'm not brilliant at putting them in different clothes, and that is something I think is genius, and I'm going to implement.
And also for kids, not buying white. I don't buy white clothes.
Yes,
because there's no point. It creates extra laundry. It leads to clothing waste. Sometimes we've done, natural dyes on white clothes, so they are no longer white. They can, have another new lease of life. But yeah, just think about the clothes that you're bringing in terms of washing them as well.
So let's do a couple of quick fire questions, because I feel like there's so many topics. I'd like to hear like just a tip you have for a couple of these sections. Halloween. How can you do sustainable Halloween?
Oh, please do. I mean, there's so many different ways. So in an ideal world, we would never have made any polyester prefab costumes. And we would all make every kind of costume for whatever event it is, Halloween, fancy dress party, World Book Day, all the things would come from things we have in our own home, bits from recycling, things we can borrow from friends.
That'd be so nice.
Dream. So I think that is my top way to do it. And actually we've had these conversations with our kids of like, no, we're not going to buy a costume that's already somebody. We're going to put together, we're going to use our creativity. And, that's actually part of the fun of it. We're going to use our creativity. And it is always a bit more fun. They're really proud of what they've put together. I love doing it. It's actually a more fun experience. At the same time, we do now have a ton of costumes in circulation. And so, obviously, if we backtrack, the problematic thing with these, pre-made, all-in-one costumes are they're usually made of polyester or plastic-based fabrics, which obviously have an environmental impact in the sourcing of those raw materials. Then I've never found a traceable cheap Halloween costume where we know who made it and where it was made and what waste that factory is giving off and how it's impacting the area around where the costume was made. Then they come into our house. Statistically, they end up in landfill very quickly. After one or no uses, they're getting there pretty quickly. Even with the best of intentions, they break quite easily. And so they still end up in landfill, which then they're causing further issues for people and planet in landfill with what's given off from landfill. So that's why we want to avoid those. Or buying cheap things, any cheap thing we're buying for a costume, same story. So I would say, short of using what you already have, buy a secondhand costume that is already in circulation. There's so many out there. Facebook Marketplace, at the right time of year, charity shops are full of them. Every charity shop I've been to in the last few weeks has had a Halloween rack full of things. Yes. Vinted, the apps, or eBay, used eBay. There's so many ways. Or, texting around friends, seeing what you've all got, or organizing a local community swap back in September for, later on, we're going to do this with, or I'm going to try and do this at our school with Christmas sweaters. They have a Christmas sweater day. So, yes. Pre-plan a few weeks earlier, everyone bring the ones from last year. Let's do a swap ahead of the day where we're all going to wear them, so we don't go out and buy cheap, who knows where they came from, Christmas sweaters. Same thing with Halloween. So just look at what's already in circulation, whether that's things you already own or costumes, ready-made costumes that you buy but secondhand, and then hand them on again. That would be my kind of go-to. And then, of course, the other thing with Halloween is the pumpkin catastrophe, we will call it, which is, when else do we take like 4 meals worth of food and just set it on our doorstep for decoration and then throw it in the rubbish to rot in landfill? Like, we just don't do that. But we do when it's pumpkin. It's very edible food. They're all edible as far as I know. Yes. And so looking at more creative ways that you can do that. So we have drawn or painted or stuck things onto the pumpkin instead of cutting into it, so that then, and making sure you pull it in time to use it before it rots. You can still do the activity. You can still have the fun and bring the joy if you want to, but then using it, after it's been a decoration. So just, again, it's that thing of thinking ahead. How is this going to leave my home? Where's it going to go? How can I alter the way I bring things in first? And where did they come from before they came to my home? But yeah, I think people are getting more aware with pumpkins. There's more places, more things you can do with them. Yeah.
I'm thinking of, do you know Rajiv Surendra on YouTube?
Oh, I don't. Do I need to?
Well, I think so. He's got a wonderful way of looking at so many things. And actually, one of the things he's been doing in the last couple of years is creating his own Tudor costume to wear forevermore every Halloween. And it's detailed and lovely and handmade. And it's a totally different way of looking at it. And I think that's with all of these things is you've got to think kind of outside of the box. You've got to actually think about things. I think we're in this culture of Amazon shopping, click it, it's here. And most people aren't thinking about where it comes from because they've got 1 minute to find it, press a button and it arrives. And it's changing that mindset, as you've already said, of you've got to think about it before the event. You've got to take that time and retrain your brain actually in so many different ways, not just with how easy it is to click and shop, but
so much of it is mindset work, I think, and countering norms and countering what we've grown up with. And I think it's actually so powerful because as we begin to change our mindset, it then plays out well in so many different places. And I think especially, I'm in a season where I've got younger kids, and I hear so many people in some of these questions go, oh, but, and then it's something to do with the kids. And actually, so we'll say on Halloween, it might be, oh, but they want to be X. And then actually going, okay, but maybe there's a really productive conversation to be had here. Am I very scared maybe to disappoint our kids for the sake of sustainability? But actually, I sometimes think, are they going to turn around when they're 20 and look back at photos and go, why did you put me in a polyester Halloween costume? And so reframing and being brave to have these conversations. And we do have them with our kids, and they're not always easy, but they feel really beautiful in what we're creating in terms of, okay, that's great that you want to be that thing. Let's talk about how we can make that happen, and if we can, and what the impact will be. And they're aware, they're able to have those conversations earlier, I think, than maybe we think. And actually then talking through the disappointment is not a problem. We actually need to learn how to deal with disappointment. And I want to frame disappointment that actually we're happy to be disappointed and work through that if it's helping someone else. That's a really important skill to have in life. So actually, you wanted to be that for Halloween. We're going to try our best, but we can't find a way to do that well. Is there someone else that we can go as? Is there something else that we can be that also takes care of the people around us as well as us getting what we want? And actually being brave to have those conversations. And sometimes it's with ourselves, just having that conversation with myself. Can I actually experience that change of plan and disappointment and not getting what I want for the sake of something good, and building that muscle?
Yes. I'm just thinking as well, forward to Christmas is a big one. And I know that's something that you will talk about on your Instagram a fair amount in the coming months.
Well,
what are you? I mean, there's so many things you could talk about. You could talk about gift giving. You could talk about the tree. You could talk about food. You could talk about traveling. You could talk about so many different things to do with Christmas. But if you could pick one thing that
I think it would be going back to that mindset piece and looking at social norms and building this principle of we can build our own traditions and be brave and create joy and not lose the joy of the season while doing things differently. And I posted a reel a way back of how we talk to our kids about, they'll inevitably have a fight and they'll come back to us and they'll say, but I was having fun. And we pause and we ask them, but was it fun for everybody? And then we find out, oh, no, it wasn't. You were excluding somebody or hitting somebody. And then we go, okay, well, it's not real fun if it's not fun for everybody. And that's like a parenting principle, but that I really pull into all these moments like Christmas and go, oh, but we need to decorate our house a certain way and gift a certain way because that's what's fun for us. That's what tradition at Christmas. And then going, okay, was it fun for everybody? Is it fun for the people living around landfill and the people who made those things and the people who deal with the emissions okay, it wasn't. Is that how we want to build our traditions? Or can we have some brave conversation and new ways of doing things to build traditions for these holidays that are actually fun for everybody? And then being brave enough to do that. And so that, for us, we gift a lot secondhand. And I love it now because I feel great about the way that I'm gifting. And secondhand can be anything from very, very expensive vintage to a little thing from the charity shop that's still thoughtful, or a secondhand book. There's a wide array of what that can be. But I think just looking and just rethinking our traditions. Why do we need to eat certain things at Christmas that are not in season at Christmas? Okay, yes. Can we change that? Oh, but we need those. Okay, but do we? Can we rethink and build new traditions that, are done well? And so we do a secondhand Christmas. And then I think the one thing we do early in the year in September is to look down our list of everyone we're gifting for and just put everyone through a filter of where can we avoid a gift at all. And I don't mean avoid the joy and the love of gifting, but we find there are people in our life where we think, do you know what? I think we would all love to give a mutual gift to charity instead, or go out for dinner instead, or just say, hey, should we just hang out and not do gifts this year? So where can we eliminate a gift altogether? Filter level 1. Filter level 2, where can we gift an experience or something that's not a thing, something like that? Then the next thing is, where can we, if we have to gift a physical item, where can we do that secondhand or homemade or something with low impact? Mm-hmm. And then we're left with actually quite a small number of people or, situations at the end where it's, okay, we are going to buy something here. We're going to buy something. It's going to be new because it needs to be for whatever reason. And then how can I do that with the lowest impact possible? So I will have gift guides that come out this year, but I make everyone go through that filter as they read through the blog post of like, yeah, these are great, more ethical, sustainable items, but they should be the final filter on our gifting. And then just doing the mindset work and the rethinking that we need to feel able to do that, having the conversations. But yeah, that filter, and then rethinking, is it fun for everybody? And then building traditions on that.
That was a really practical way of looking at it. I really appreciate you sharing that. I was just thinking again of one of the things I adore about your Instagram is when you cost things out. I love it when you do that. I think my brain thinks a lot like that and is sort of trying to kind of break it down and work out. We assume so much, don't we, about how things should go, and then actually when you look at it, you think, oh wow, that's like a lot less expensive or a lot more expensive, or I'm not willing to. I find that fascinating. And I was just wondering if you can remember the first thing you ever did that with, the first thing you costed out, or one of the first.
Yeah, I think actually two things spring to mind, but I mean, food wise, it was meat, because my husband, 3 meals a day, meat makes a meal. That was him. And then I came from this, upbringing. If we're going to eat meat, we're going to source it in the most animal and environment friendly way that we can, which costs more financially. And so it was I would like buy these packs of, organic local ground beef and go, right, this cost me this much. How can I get the most meals out of it while still checking my husband's box if he feels like he's eaten meat? And that was the beginning of the journey. And then we went on to him actually wanting to eat less meat. But the beginning was going, okay, how can I make this do the most meals possible? And how can I, cost, I've got to split it up. I can't have more than X, it was dollars then, of meat per meal. What are the recipes where that works? And really costing out the meat in things, because I wanted to buy more expensive meat and he wanted to eat more. So I was like, all right, I'll bridge this gap. And we're going to do it by numbers. So that, and then I think when we first furnished our home together, I mean, and this was a more broad, I guess it wasn't really costed out, but we had suddenly a 3-bedroom home to fill. We'd both been living with other people. We didn't have a ton of furniture. And we just did a quick bit of maths and realized we're buying everything secondhand. Because if we look at this quickly and tot up the amount it's going to be, and then look at what we can get secondhand, and everything in our home was secondhand. We slowly filled the home with pieces from garage sales and estate sales and pieces, secondhand. So not the same way of costing out, but just looking at the numbers more broadly and going, nope, not spending money like that. This will all be secondhand. So, but yeah, meat was the first thing that I really kind of costed out like that.
I would definitely go through the same thing. We have quite a high value on meat. Well, my husband has a high value on making sure he has meat, not at every meal, but at dinner time for sure. I like to buy really as high quality as I can. And like you say, it does require costing out. Sometimes we just sort of take a little bit less and add a tin of chickpeas, or we do things like that. But I think that's going to be very familiar for a lot of people listening. The secondhand with the house is something I think is so different from the way a lot of my friends seem to furnish their houses, because I think everyone wants it straight away. Yep. It's another mindset shift, isn't it? Or perhaps it's just the same one. It's something that I grumble with a lot, because my house is far from how I'd love it to be. And I don't see, I mean, maybe in 15 years I'll have collected things and things will be as I want it to be. But it is so frustrating seeing other people's really beautifully made homes and then feeling like it's going to take so long to get there. But it is one of the reasons I wanted to start this podcast, was my frustration with everyone living these like perfect farmhouse lives with everything looking so perfect. And I just don't think that's actually the way that it is for so many people. And potentially, even if you have all of that, you're probably still dissatisfied and want to change it.
Yeah.
When you're buying secondhand furniture, what do you like? What's your process with that? I mean, you said you do it from different places. How do you go about doing that? I don't feel like I'm very good at that. Perhaps I don't feel like I've got good source, or I'm maybe just not very good at Facebook Marketplace, and I should be.
I think it really does have to start with mindset. And I really struggled with this when we were kind of newly married and all our friends, had all matching everything that they just went and bought in one go. And their houses were instantly furnished and it was all happy. And I was like, wait, but my house is not like this. But I actually then thought and went, but do I wish my house was like theirs? Or am I kind of wishing for a dreamland? Because do I want to spend that much money? Do I want to have that environmental impact? Or do I want to spend less money and therefore have the cheaper items that are not actually things I want in my home? And then it kind of brought me back to, I actually do want to do this slowly, but I'm going to be aware of what I'm doing and I'm going to choose to embrace it. And we actually, one time, we moved into our house at the same time as friends moved into their house, and our budgets were probably a little bit different. And instantly their house was full of the most beautiful furniture, and ours was full of a few secondhand pieces and quite empty with nothing on the walls. But it was really good for me to kind of literally side by side see those two realities and be forced to get over my feeling that my home had to look a certain way, and to just choose to embrace it and go, there's a reason I'm doing this. It's for budget, it's for sustainability, it's for sourcing. That is what I care about and what I want. And I will build my home slowly. And I am fine with that. This is a process, but I don't know how you get there, because it was kind of a personal journey I went on, but really embracing that. I am now so glad that I've done that. So when I'm buying things secondhand, I think sometimes you sell pieces on, you kind of slowly find what style you're going for, and that's okay. It's okay to have some different iterations. And, we bought a leather couch when we first moved to England, and we just needed one and we bought it and I liked it. But then slowly I went, oh wait, this isn't quite the right one. So we sold it on 4 years later. And then I found a really nice corner one that was just perfect and exactly what I wanted. But you have to go slowly. And I looked for that new sofa for months, but it's okay with the waiting and the searching. So I kind of have a list of things I'm searching for when I'm searching. And I do a quick search every day or every other day. And I think that's the way it works the best, whether it's charity shops. Locally, we have a furniture one quite close to us, or whether it's online, not trying to get everything in one go in the Amazon Prime mindset, but going, in the next 6 months, I would like to replace this. I'm going to wait until we find the right thing. I think it's something you have to embrace. And then, just going slowly and testing things out, and then being okay with what you get. But I tend to look for, wooden items, that can be repaired. If I'm buying, soft things like rugs, I'll always look for cotton, or 100% cotton or wool typically, because those are kind of the things I want in our home environment, and they also tend to last longer. Yeah, but then it's just having patience, really, and being okay, and choosing to, when people come over, to just, I'm very grateful for our home. No, it doesn't look like what everyone else's homes look like, but I love it. and it's our home, and maybe it doesn't have some things because I'm waiting on finding them secondhand. But I'm not ashamed of that, and I'm choosing not to be. We're lucky to have a home, and I don't need to keep up with the Joneses on it. I want to live by my values.
I do find with secondhand furniture shopping, my husband gets a little bit of the heebie-jeebies of it having been used. I think a lot of people probably do feel that way, but I agree with your tips. If it's cotton, you can wash it. If it's wood, you can wash it and paint it. There's so many things you can do with pieces. My daughter needs, she doesn't need, again, a word, very important word, could do with a wardrobe. She's currently got a chest of drawers. She's had it since she was a baby. She's just turned 4, and she could do with hanging some of these dresses because I'm folding them about 4 times to fit them in the drawers. So we did go and have a look in charity shops. There are a couple that do furniture, but I do feel like there were a couple that would have been okay, but not quite right. And it is that I think a lot of people would find getting to the end of that day, going out to have a look for this thing, feeling like they needed to buy the best one they could find that day. And in fact, I came home with nothing because it was the better option to just wait and keep going and go back again another time, maybe have a look at different places. And I think one of the pitfalls of starting down secondhand shopping is doing that, is buying something that's less than because you think it will be the best of. And actually you can find really great stuff out there. It's the same with clothes shopping. I often go out, I might even look around 5 or 6 charity shops and come back with nothing because nothing met the standard. Nothing had like sort of the brand names I would look for because I know they'll wash well and the quality will be thick enough. And I think people feel like they have to come back with something.
Well, it's how we're marketed to. And I think, like we talked about at the beginning, a lot of this journey is unpicking the marketing and the social norms. And so actually setting ourselves up emotionally for the journey of finding these new pieces and setting family members up and going, okay, we're going to start looking. We're about to switch our kids into different rooms. And so we've been looking for a long time. I need a lamp for one of the rooms. And so we've been looking. And it's just, the kids know we've been looking for a few weeks, and they'll say, has the right lamp come up yet? And I say, not yet. Or I checked in on one, but they haven't responded yet, or things like that. But they know, and we haven't found the right one yet. And who knows when we will, but kind of setting everyone up for that journey. And, I think, it's sorting expectations at the beginning is really key.
I think I did go mad when I first started charity shopping because I lived right next to a whole row there were probably about 10, and it was my thing to do with my son. And I did go totally bonkers. I think I've definitely learned from that you can have the same consumerist mindset, but with secondhand things. But that's similarly dangerous because, like you said, it's still coming into your home. That means you have to get rid of something potentially. And then, and what does the life cycle of that still look like? So as you talk about this as a journey, what resources do you use to keep yourself educated? You did mention earlier that actually you probably know enough to keep in this journey forever, but I do feel like there is an evolving conversation about sustainability, about climate crisis, about all these things that interlink. And there's always new documentaries and things like that. Do you watch those? Do you read? Do you do that, or are you just in it?
I do a mix. I think some of the documentaries can be great. I think Kiss the Ground was the last one that I watched. But I think sometimes documentaries can get quite polarized and exclude certain people from the conversation. And not that makes them bad, but it makes me probably slower to recommend them because I don't know, I want to bring everyone along on the journey, but maybe I exclude people from resources they need by doing that. But I think on that, one of the big things for me that I feel like I want to combat is this idea that you have to understand and be bought into the idea of climate change to care about the environment and people around you. And I think, especially I would say maybe in our time in America, came across a lot of people who didn't want to engage in the conversation of sustainability, either because it felt tied to a political party or because it felt tied to climate change, which wasn't a concept they were on board with, and therefore they didn't engage with the journey of sustainability. And so I think a lot of my presence online is going, let's separate these things out. I actually want to give reason for making all the same life choices that are tied more to direct impact on people than some of these hard to engage with or be moved by big principles. And I think also for a lot of people where climate change is a driver for them, it's also hard to engage with that as a reality sometimes for making small individual choices. And for me, I find people more of an easy to grasp onto and more compelling reason when I think about like landfill and the people living around landfill, or the people affected today by my car emissions. I find that more of a driver for me to change than degrees of the earth, just for my brain. And so I think, we went on a tangent there. But anyway, so that sometimes makes me slow on recommending resources, and I more tend to talk about our own journey. But a book that I just read that I think everybody should read is Consumed by Aja Barber.
I have heard of that one. Yeah.
It's a fantastic book, and it kind of centers around clothing, but it's really good for diving into actually the impact of our choices in consumerism, with a lot of facts and figures and little pieces of the story where I think people aren't aware of it. So it really is an education on the full impact of how we consume. And, things like, okay, but what happens in the charity shop cycle when we just give things to a charity shop? What is the chain of events that happens after that, and the impact? And okay, how do we need to backtrack and reverse engineer to change things? So that is probably the number one thing at the moment that I would recommend, is either listen or read Consumed by Aja Barber. But there's a lot of other things out there, but none springing to mind immediately as much as that one book, which I think has been a really, really good read for me. And either to start the journey or to, add fuel to the fire for people on the journey is a really, really good one. Yeah. But then I think too, and I like to read the news as well. I think there's a lot of, opinion pieces and a lot of chat on social media, and a lot of, things that can get really polarized. But actually, I probably spend more of my time diving into companies and supply chains and looking at what's actually happening, and then reading news stories about when these things come into the news, and kind of looking more factually at the impact of our choices than the documentary, things like that. But yeah, that's a waffly answer.
I think one of my driving factors, which potentially is not a strong driving factor, but it's something I think of often, it's just historically, how would people have done this? Because it's so recent that we've had the ability to click and collect, to have things delivered immediately, to have polyester fabric costumes, and just so much of how we do life is so different from even 100 years ago, let alone 200 years ago. Life was very similar for a really long time. Not that I want to romanticize the past, because I'm grateful for my bathroom, I'm grateful for medicines, I'm grateful for so many things, but all of the conveniences that are brought with our regular daily life are something I think we just need to think about.
Absolutely. And I think it's really helpful to look at the history in terms of, sometimes it can feel like, why is this thing bad? Why is this thing now bad? Why do I now need to change this? And realizing that in the last few decades, we've made so many changes in terms of convenience and changing the way that we consume. And that is why we now suddenly are having to look at undoing a lot of things, because we've spent the last few decades doing the opposite. And I think a few years ago, we reached the point where I think, it would maybe still be true, that in the last 10 years, we've created the same amount of plastic, or added the same amount of plastic to landfill, one of the two, than in all of history before the last 10 years. And I realized that those 10 years were all in my lifetime. And it really helped me with perspective to see that's why there's suddenly needs to be so much focus on this. It's not because, wow, suddenly everything is bad and we can't do everything and everything we buy is bad. It's suddenly we've brought in all these new things and we need to backtrack a bit and go, wait, what were we doing before we reached for convenience, and how can we slowly unpick this again? Yeah.
Just kind of round this out, if anyone is listening to this conversation, has made it to this point in the conversation and is still unconvinced that any of their actions make a difference, what would you say to that person?
I would say it's absolutely okay to not tackle everything. and to start with something that does feel like it makes a difference, because we can all probably find something where we feel like it makes a difference, but pick your topic, and you don't have to start by caring about everything. You don't have to finish by caring about everything. Make it your journey. And so I would look at, maybe it's supporting a local farmer and realizing that actually when we put our money locally into food, there are so many studies on the positive impact of this in terms of food miles, in terms of that money then tends to be spent locally. It improves the local economy. And then you can actually maybe meet the person who made the food, or maybe it's buying a local honey and actually has a positive effect on your body, but also supports a local beekeeper who is really actually tending to a colony of bees right there locally to you. So find something that feels tangible. Or maybe it's, just looking at one piece of clothing that you could buy that will end up in landfill and going, okay, even if I don't think I can solve the world by this, I can stop this one piece of clothing from going in landfill, and I would like to do that. And so maybe picking one thing, but also realizing sometimes the one thing does feel really small, but I think what we don't talk about in these tiny steps is that they change us. And I think sometimes that's the powerful piece of the small steps, is actually not what the small step does for the planet or for people, but what the small step does for us. And you never know where that journey is going to go. And so building that journey of caring, a heart that is caring, a heart that is diligent and wanting to make these choices and spend money wisely, that can grow into something. So I do look inward too and go, even if I feel like it's making no difference, I still want to make the choices I believe are right and be diligent with those, for the sake of the people who they do affect. If I ever was to meet one of them too, I would, think about it as on an individual human level, but too that I want to change. I want to be somebody that is, mindful of these different pieces. And I'm going to change me. If I'm not focusing outward, I want to focus inward and change me in how I care.
And also setting a lovely example for your children as well.
Yes.
In that.
Yeah.
I think that also answers the other question I had, which was, there's another type of person. So there's a type of person that thinks, can't be bothered, I don't think it makes any difference. And there's another sort of person who is trying their hardest, but is in a sort of state of overwhelm. Maybe they've read too much information and they're kind of panicked about it. Is there anything else you would say to that person?
I think we have to develop this muscle of being able to do what we can do and then releasing the rest. And it is incredibly hard sometimes, but we're only powerful over what we're powerful over. And so actually going, what can I do right now? And then embracing that wholeheartedly. And at least for now, letting the rest of the things go. And because otherwise we destroy ourselves and then we're able to bring less change. But also, I think sometimes, that feeling that problem and feeling the need can be a good thing. It's a driver, but kind of holding out, okay, I'm going to do what I can, and then I'm going to let the rest go for now. And another day we'll pick up something new. But it's definitely a muscle to build, because it can be hard and anxiety is real and it can be very difficult. So I think it probably comes through practice, and sometimes I feel it and sometimes I really don't. But trying.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. I think this will be really helpful to so many people listening. I think there definitely were some good tips in there, some definite takeaways for me as well. And I think a lot of the chat about mindset is so crucial and important, and something I think people are thinking about, but sometimes need a little direction in. And I think you were the perfect person to have talk about this. So I'm really grateful for your chat today. Would you tell us where to find you, what you're up to, and if people want to continue to engage with you, how to do so?
Yeah, I am thewholehome.co.uk is my website, and then they're on Instagram at the.whole.home, and and on YouTube too. I'm actually not sure what my handle is there. I'm trying to post more there because I think that longer form content is actually sometimes more helpful on this journey.
You're the whole home on YouTube, by the way. Yeah, I think you are.
And getting out of I think there's definitely pros and cons to social media and how it affects us and the fast pace of it. So sometimes I like to be able to search out more intentional content, and I love YouTube for that. So I am posting a bit more there. And you mentioned meal planning. I have a meal planning walkthrough that is going live next week. So more bits on there.
Excellent. That sounds brilliant. Meal planning is just like amazing and so important, and something people don't always do. So it's great that you've got more resources for that and help guide people through that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if anyone, we can do a discount code for that book that you have that has kind of our core recipes that we throw into our meal plan. If anyone wants to get that too, we can do that.
Oh, lovely. Okay. Yes, we'll sort that out. That sounds great. All right. Thank you so much. Have a really brilliant rest of your day.
Thank you. You too. It was fun to be here. Thanks for chatting.
So there you have it. I hope you really enjoyed that conversation. I hope it has inspired you. I hope it has encouraged you. I hope you've got a few little takeaway tips. The conversation will, of course, continue over on @TheEnglishHomemaker on Instagram. So do follow on over there for that discount code and for some more information. And I'll be sharing links to some of the books that she recommended and things like that. So I really hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you so much for listening today. If you did enjoy this episode, please enjoy going back over my last 10 episodes. I'm super proud of the ones that I've put out so far. There's some really great conversations, some really great information that I'd love for you to listen to. If you enjoy all of those or some of those, or even just today, hit the subscribe button on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to be notified every time there's a new episode. I do try and upload a new episode every other Thursday. And then if you want to go one step further than that, please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps other homemakers see this content. And most important thing that you could do is to share the latest episode that you've really enjoyed with a friend, a family member, mum at the school gate, or maybe someone at work. So to round out this podcast, I want to end with a quote. You will often find me quoting things because there are many smarter people than I that need to have their opinion heard and words shared. So this is from Martin Luther King. It is from the 1967 Christmas sermon on peace. It's lecture number 5. And this is what he said. He said, "It really boils down to this, that all life is interrelated. We are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied into a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. We are made to live together because of the interrelated structure of reality. Did you ever stop to think that you can't leave for your job in the morning without being dependent upon most of the world? You get up in the morning and go to the bathroom and reach over for the sponge, and that's handed you by a Pacific Islander. You reach for a bar of soap, and that's given to you at the hands of a Frenchman. And then you go into the kitchen to drink your coffee for the morning, and that is poured into your cup by a South American. And maybe you want tea. That's poured into your cup by a Chinese. Or maybe you desire to have cocoa for breakfast, and that's poured into your cup by a West African. And then you reach over for your toast, and that's given you at the hands of an English-speaking farmer, not to mention the baker. And before you finish eating breakfast in the morning, you've depended on more than half the world. This is the way our universe is structured. It is its interrelated quality. We aren't going to have peace on earth until we recognise this basic fact of the interrelated structure of all reality." Wow. I'm just going to leave that one there for you to ponder for the rest of today. I hope you have a brilliant, brilliant day, and thank you so much for joining me. Bye.